I never imagined that in their final moments, these strangers would unite to save a life. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air held a heavy weight, thick with the scent of rain yet to fall. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears like a war drum, as I stood on the edge of that crowded street, staring at the chaos around me. In a moment, the world shifted. A piercing scream shattered the silence. People turned, eyes wide, breaths hitching in throats. A flash of something bright caught my attention, a flash of red, gleaming against the gray concrete. It was a car, swerving wildly, out of control, tires screeching in a sound that clawed at my insides. I could feel the tension rippling through the crowd like an electric surge. Each person was frozen, yet united in fear, their faces pale, shadows of disbelief etched deep in their features. I, too, was caught in this trembling hold. Who were these strangers, and why did it feel so personal? I turned to my right. A woman with tear-streaked cheeks was gripping her daughter's hand, knuckles white from the strength of her fear. And to my left, an elderly man, his face a blend of worry and resolve, murmuring something that I couldn't make out yet understood all too well. We were all strangers, but in that suffocating moment, we were bound by something inexplicable. The traffic lights blinked red, only to be drowned out by a voice shouting from somewhere a desperate plea. A man rushed to the center of the street, waving his arms wildly, eyes locked on the chaos ahead. Time slowed as I watched the scene unravel, my stomach twisting in knots. What was he doing? Did he think he could stop it? And then it happened. A child, a little boy, darted out from behind a parked car, laughter echoing pure joy, blissfully unaware. My breath caught, and a lump formed in my throat, throbbing with horror. No. Panic exploded in my chest. The chaos around me erupted. People screamed, mouths wide in horror, eyes wide with dread. In that frantic heartbeat, everything came together. The crowd surged forward, some reaching out, some yelling, and somehow, in that breathtaking moment of collective empathy and fear, we became a team. Each of us moving without thought, instinctively running toward the boy. But what could we do? Our hearts beat as one, but were we too late? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The cacophony of voices reverberated around me, blurring into a disorienting swirl of chaos and urgency. I found myself pushing harder against the tide of terrified faces, the child's laughter still echoing in my mind, an incongruous melody amidst the dread. The moment felt surreal, time stretching in impossible ways. I surged toward the boy, heart hammering, adrenaline surging through my veins like a wildfire. With every step, I felt the weight of each breath around me, a collective inhale, an earnest prayer suspended in air. Determination propelled me forward, a fire igniting within as I caught glimpses of upturned faces, eyes reflecting the same hope I clung to fiercely. We were all strangers bound by a mutual understanding of love and fear. In that instant, anything more than that seemed secondary. A man near me, tall, athletic, with desperation etched into his features, broke through the crowd, kicking off his shoes, sprinting faster than I thought was possible. "Hold on!" he shouted, voice raw, and I believed him for that sliver of a moment. That everyone would hold on. That we could all will the world to slow down, to give us ample time to intervene. But as reality clenched tighter around my chest, I fought the encroaching feeling of hopelessness. The car still careened, a metal beast with a mind of its own, tires screeching as it crossed the threshold into the open space of the street. I watched, eyes wide, instinct screaming, as the man drew closer to the boy.no. I shouted, but my voice dissolved into the roar of panic. The woman beside me clutched her daughter even tighter, tears cascading like rainfall, her sobs mixing with the collective gasps of the crowd. In the whirlwind of dread, I glimpsed a flicker of red light through the chaos, not just of the car, but glimmers of the police sirens far in the distance. Hope. Or a cruel irony, then, just as it seemed the universe would steal our chance, the determined man lunged. I saw his arm outstretch, the rush of wind parting for his heroic dive, but at that moment, something unexpected happened. The little boy stumbled. The joy carved into his features twisted in confusion, and he fell, but not before the man grasped him, cradling the boy in his arms and rolling to safety. Moments before the car could reach them, the crowd erupted. Cheers sliced through the air, pulsing with relief that seemed almost tangible, palpable in the charged atmosphere. Safety. Salvation. But as I let the belief wrap around me, another wave of darkness crashed. The man's body had remained still, the boy curled safely beside him, but my heart sank as I noticed the ways he sagged, body slack and unresponsive. A whirlwind of emotions swarmed, confusion interspersed with elation. The child, gleefully unaware, clung to his savior, laughing sweetly, thinking this a game. The cracks in the shelter of our briefly shared euphoria began to expose a raw truth. Something was terribly wrong. Help. Someone call an ambulance. I cried, pushing forward again, forcing the realization down as despair crept closer with every passing breath. A part of me was still rooted in fear, a remnant of panic clinging like a shadow, an echo of the moment it all unraveled. As I reached the man on the ground, glimpsing his pale face, I saw the elderly figure beside us kneeling, his hands trembling over the man whose heroic act was now marred by uncertainty. Please, the man murmured, gesturing helplessly, we need help. But even as he vocalized our shared need, the faint whispers of helplessness seeped into my veins. The boy's laughter faded, swallowed in the siren's wail as they grew nearer. Would it be enough? My chest tightened around a rock of dread, speech dried in my throat as I looked around, the faces of strangers now a chorus of despair, and just then, a flicker of a hand reached toward mine, trembling yet determined. It was the woman with the little girl. We need a plan. Together, she said, steely resolve in her eyes, but beneath that conviction lay a desperate yearning, a glimmer of fear that threatened to overwhelm her. In that moment, as the sirens neared, it felt as if time stopped entirely. The chaos around us transformed into something more poignant. Our shared warmth and humanity pressed against the coldness of fate and uncertainty. We were indeed united as strangers, yet now forged irrevocably by a greater challenge looming ahead. The ambulance arrived, screeching to a halt. My heart leaped into my throat when I realized the man who acted with such courage might not live to tell his story. And then, out from the back emerged a figure I could hardly believe, a woman wearing the same red jacket as the child had donned moments before, the very garment that ignited my sense of urgency. It was his mother, and in those moments, everything changed again. My heart broke for the anguish I saw reverberating in her eyes as she rushed toward the scene. Would she gain a son and lose a savior all in the same heartbeat? In that frozen second, no one could answer that question. We were still strangers, bound by our shared heartache, and the weight of what lay ahead overwhelmed me. Life as we knew it had irrevocably shifted, teetering on the edge of a new dawn or a heartbreak beyond measure. As the sirens pierced through the thick air, their anguished wails intermingled with the distant cries of onlookers. The scene before me felt like an unraveling tapestry, threads of human experience and emotion pulling apart under the strain of desperate tragedy. The woman in the red jacket was racing toward her son, and every frantic heartbeat echoed the reality of dual fates hanging in the balance. Life and death, joy and sorrow intertwined. My mind spiraled, the dread mingling with the urgency of the moment. I couldn't shake the images of the child's laughter, bare and innocent, clashing against the reality that hovered just an arm's length away. I stepped aside to make space for the woman, but she was already barreling past me, her eyes locked onto her son, unaware of the weight that had fallen upon the man who had shielded him. "Bobby! My baby!" she cried, weaving through the crowd, her voice a siren call that clawed at my heart. The boy, oblivious to the severity of the situation, gazed up and laughed, pointing at the flashing lights, his innocence shimmering like sunlight against the gathering storm clouds of anguish. I wanted to scream for her to stop, to call back the joy she didn't yet realize was fleeting. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I found myself standing there, a mute witness to history unfolding in slow motion. When she reached her son, her arms enveloped him, and for a moment, all seemed right with the world: warmth, love, and a sweetness that seemed to envelop them in an ethereal glow. But before the world could exhale and offer relief, she turned back to the man, her joy evaporating into a tempest of fear. "Where is he? Where is he?" Her hands trembled, running through her hair as she searched for answers among unfamiliar faces. It struck me that, for her, the moment wasn't about two lives intertwined, it was a reality wrapped in unpredictability, where salvation and grief danced perilously close. The paramedics surged forth, their intensity palpable, each movement laced with urgency. They hurried to the fallen man, their professionalism contrasting sharply with the emotional tatters unraveling around us. I watched, heart hammering, as they exchanged hushed words while attending to him, but I could see the underlying tension, the quickened breaths, the too still posture of the savior who had acted without thought for his own safety. A soft whisper curled next to me. It was the woman with the little girl again, her brown eyes reflecting a ferocity of concern. "They need a clear path. We have to help them," she urged, and I could sense her tenacity weaving a lifeline into the chaos. "Right, yes." I nodded, fighting against the weight pressing down in my chest. Her words ignited a sense of purpose in me, and together, we began directing bystanders back, creating the necessary space. A shared belief in our collective strength began to cement itself silently, spreading whispered promises among the crowd, even if fate toyed insidiously with our hope. Meanwhile, the boy in the red jacket tightened his grip around his mother's fingers, a small protector unknowingly embracing her worry. I watched their connection with an aching heart, picturing the joy that once filled their existence now juxtaposed against the fragility of fate. As the paramedics worked, counting pulses, checking vitals, everyone around held their breath, a collective pulse reverberating through the haze of anguish. I found my eyes drawn back to the man who had acted selflessly, his body now a canvas of uncertainty. The sirens faded, leaving only the sound of heartbeats echoing in the silence filled with fear and anticipation. Then, as if the entire universe held its breath, the paramedic shouted, "He's stable. We need to move." The crowd erupted into a rush of muffled sighs and whispers of relief while I felt my own breath trapped, refusing to let go of the reality still hanging over us like a specter. But as they pulled the man onto the stretcher, his face revealed a solitude so profound I wanted to scream. Would anyone understand his sacrifice? Or would it remain a footnote in the story of another man's life? Unable to stop myself, I stepped closer, impulsively reaching out, wanting to connect. I wanted him to feel our gratitude, to understand that even as time seemed cruel, his act of bravery tethered us all in that moment, creating ripples of hope in a sea of despair. And then something unexpected happened. As the stretcher passed, he opened his eyes briefly, locking onto mine, a flicker of consciousness tinged with pain glistening in his gaze. In that moment, understanding fused between us. In a world splintered by fear, we formed an unbreakable bond, compassion fierce against the tide of tragedy. But just as quickly, darkness swallowed that flicker, and the paramedics hurried him into the ambulance. The door swung shut, and a weight settled over us anew. Would that be his final act of heroism? Would I ever know if he received the chance at life he had fought for? The world spun back into motion, yet it remained suspended in a delicate balance, unraveling thread by thread. I turned, seeking solace from the woman beside me, only to find her gaze shifted toward the horizon. "Look," she whispered, her breath shaky, pointing to the distance. My heart sank at what I saw: a gathering storm gathering on the periphery, dark clouds rolling in ominously. And amongst them, the sharp outline of a figure stood solitary, watching us from afar. A flicker of recognition stirred within. The car that had nearly claimed it all. Had they been more than just metal and steel? As dread washed over me again, the veiled truth loomed like an island in a whirlwind of chaos, waiting to pull us beneath the surface of our own humanity. Who is that? I breathed, fear threading through me, and in the depth of her voice, I heard the roots of understanding hardening in uncertainty. That I don't know, but we need to find out. Her determination echoed the resolve that had fought its way through our gathering of strangers. Yet even as we drew closer, I felt another thread snapping, the strands of fate pulling tighter, refusing to show us the path ahead. As darkness began to unfurl its inky shadows around us, I sensed the weight of burdens still to come, whispers of a deeper truth beneath the surface, a story not yet told, where sacrifices bore the cost of more than just a single life, threatening to unravel the very fabric of our existence. Could we truly navigate this uncertain ocean we now shared? The thunder rumbled in the distance, a menacing echo that reverberated through my chest, spilling doubt into my mind. The woman's eyes were wide with a mix of determination and fear as she clutched her daughter's hand tightly, pulling her close. "Let's get a better view," she urged, moving toward the line of spectators who had gathered like moths drawn to a flickering flame. I followed, my heart pounding, not just from the desperation of the scene but from a tangle of questions that twisted in my gut. As we edged through the throng, I caught snippets of conversation around us, voices painted with anxiety and curiosity. People spoke of the man, his bravery no longer a secret but veering dangerously close to legend, and of the boy who had been so blissfully unaware just moments ago. There was a bond forming between strangers, each person discovering shared pieces of hope within themselves, although darkness loomed just as heavily over our heads. "Do you think he'll be okay?" I asked the woman beside me, desperation clawing at my throat. My question hung in the air like a prayer unuttered, the kind of question that could attract an unbearable answer. "I don't know," she said softly, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. "But we have to believe he will be. He saved that boy, he deserves to live." The gravity of her words settled between us like a shared vow, a promise to carry that hope even when despair threatened to derail us. I looked down at the little girl, her innocence untouched, artlessly caught in the crossfire of adult worries as she held her mother's hand, thumb tracing circles around her knuckles. There was something profoundly beautiful in that simple act, a reminder that love could flourish even in the rubble of tragedy. Behind us, an older man leaned against the railing, his face lined with unyielding sorrow. I could see the veil of grief draping over him. Perhaps he had experienced a similar loss, or had witnessed heroism that didn't blossom into salvation. I caught his eye, and for an instant, our connection was palpable, two shadows seeking light in the same overwhelming darkness. As the storm clouds thickened, a gust of wind swept through the crowd, creating a ripple of movement that sent a shiver down my spine. My gaze was drawn back to the spot where the ominous figure had stood, but it was now vacant, swallowed whole by the encroaching shadows. Anxiety quivered in me, rattling my bones. Perhaps fate had deployed its cruel hand, but the thought of being left in ignorance gnawed at my insides. "Let's look for him," I blurted, the urgency snapping into place. "He has to be here." "Who?" The woman's brow furrowed as she searched my face. "The driver," I replied, swallowing hard. "The one in the car. Something tells me there's a connection." The notion that our fates were inexplicably entwined gripped my heart, igniting a flame in my chest that pushed me to move forward, grounded in a shared sense of urgent purpose with this woman I barely knew. I turned my back to the moving throng, the name of the boy trapped in the chaos echoing in my mind like a chant. Memories, whispers, and questions formed an invisible tether, pulling me into the unknown. As we scanned our surroundings, I noticed a figure creeping from the edge of the chaos, emerging from the gathering murkiness. A mere silhouette at first, but as the figure stepped closer under the flickering streetlight, I recognized him, the driver. His face was inscrutable, shadowed by guilt and regret, but I felt an instinctual urge to approach him, to understand. "Hey!" I called out, my voice ringing above the rumble of the distant storm. As he turned, I caught a glimpse of his eyes, dark pools of weariness. "Are you okay?" He paused, uncertainty hanging heavily between us, a bridge built on the frail foundations of our plight. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper as he looked away. "Shame weighing down the words that we know," I said softly, stepping closer. "But that man, you could have been part of something incredible. He saved a life." Something flickered within his gaze, a fracture that revealed brittle layers of pain and confusion. "He shouldn't have had to," he breathed, the weight of those words lingering in the air like smoke. I just wanted to get home, but the stifling atmosphere around us thickened, and the skies darkened further, enveloping us in shadow as the chilling winds whirled around us. The woman shifted, leaning in closer, her voice resolute. He made a choice that day. Sometimes, it's those who feel lost that find their way back in helping others, helping. He shook his head, disbelief etched into his features. The reason he's in there fighting for his life that I in that moment, I realized, the cycles of guilt and remorse were entangled not just within him but within all of us, incessantly feeding on our fears as we waded through the unknown together. And just as my thoughts began to spiral, a sudden explosion of sirens returned, cutting through the tension, rebounding back into the night. They're coming back. Someone yelled, dread echoing like an ominous drum in the night that we turned as paramedics surged forward again, a wave of urgency crashing against the stillness that had momentarily settled over us. My heart sank as they rushed toward the ambulance, their movements swift yet purposeful, veined with anxiety, renewing the undercurrent of desperation that is he okay? I gasped, taking a step toward them. The man who rescued before I could conclude my question, the paramedic closest to me held up a hand, a grave expression crossing his face. He's fighting for his life, he said firmly, gaze unwavering. But we're not giving up. The revelation hung heavily between us, a new tension rising, transforming into an unbearable weight. Wait! I managed to call out, wrestling against the wave of impending anguish. With a sudden burst of courage, I rushed toward the gathering crowd, feeling the woman and her child behind me. A flicker of hope ignited once more. Together. I shouted, voice rising against the tangible tension. Let's stand together for him, for us, for every life intertwined. And as we formed a chain around the situation, strangers bound by shared determination, I became acutely aware of our collective strength, united beneath the darkening sky. And just then, a blinding flash of lightning sliced through the gloom, illuminating a revelation that left me breathless. We were woven together in this tapestry of fate, held together not just by fear but by an undeniable light flickering against the storm. Yet as swiftly as it arrived, that light flickered out, leaving stark uncertainty in its wake. In the heart of the storm brewing above us, I felt another shadow creeping, one that hinted at even deeper secrets buried beneath the surface. The thread of fate tightened once more, snarling ominously, reminding me that while we fought to save a life, the battle against our own pasts had only just begun. The rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, drenching the asphalt and blessing the tension with an oddly calming rhythm. Still, the air trembled with desperation as droplets splattered against the ground, creating puddles that reflected the chaos surrounding us. Together, we stood shoulder to shoulder, our breaths merging into a collective mantra of hope, but beneath the veneer, unease festered like an unseen wound. That I caught the woman's pained glance as she tightened her grip on her daughter's little fingers, her knuckles widening from the pressure. What if he doesn't make it? She whispered, vulnerability cracking the resolve in her voice. The little girl glanced up, innocent confusion in her wide gaze, oblivious to the weight of adult worries pressing down upon us. That he has to, I replied, though I felt the tremor of doubt in my own heart. He's fighting. It felt feeble, almost hollow, but it was the best I could offer as the sirens slowed, the cacophony dwindling into an echoing thrum that resonated within my chest. To my left, the older man leaned deeper against the railing, his weathered face etched with shadows of grief and memories untold. I could sense his story swirling in the air, a man once engaged in brave acts, now grappling with the ashes of a past he might never escape. It appeared that uncertainty had marked us all, and I wanted to know more, but the storm shrouded his history, and I wasn't sure any of us had the strength to unravel it yet. Then, as if conjured by the storm itself, a figure emerged from the vanishing mist, a young man in scrubs, his expression taut with urgency, dread joining forces with hope on his face. As he reached the encampment of onlookers, he scanned the crowd, eyes landing on the woman beside me. Excuse me, he began, his voice both soothing and urgent. Is anyone here related to the man who saved the boy? The one brought in just now. Each heart enveloped in the crowd stuttered to a halt, the air around us thickening like molasses as we exchanged uncertain glances. I stepped forward, adrenaline surging. I am here. What's happening? He swallowed hard, biting back the tension that threatened to explode. "He's stable for now," but he hesitated, and it felt like a chasm opened beneath us, a deep, gaping void. "He's not out of the woods yet. There's damage, internal bleeding. We need to monitor him closely, and he'll need immediate follow-up surgery." A wave of relief and dread collided within me, building a pressure like the storm overhead. We were teetering between hope and despair, and the ground beneath me swayed dangerously. Just as I was about to ask for more information, I noticed the woman beside me begin to tremble, the little girl shifting awkwardly as she sensed her mother's distress. "Please," the man in scrubs went on, "we need anyone who knows him, anyone who can lend their strength to support him or aid in his recovery. We all know how invaluable hope can be in these times." That simple request stirred something deep within me. I looked at the crowd, a motley assembly of people bound not just by sorrow but now by something more profound. Amidst the fragments of despair, they somehow formed a mosaic of strength that began to take shape. Each voice added depth to the resonance of our hope, stitching together a tapestry of shared desire for new beginnings. "Let's do it," I urged, glancing at the woman again, inviting her spirit to rise alongside mine. "This is our chance, we can stand together for him." As murmurs of agreement rustled through the crowd, the woman nodded, her chest heaving with determination. The little girl looked up, and for the first time, I thought I saw the faintest glimmer of understanding shining in her eyes. Each of us was holding on to the slim chance that our collective strength could somehow reach the man, weaving a thread that echoed through the sterile halls of the hospital and into the uncertainty of his fate. But then, as we readied ourselves, a muffled shout erupted from the nearby ambulances, swiftly followed by the chaotic clatter of nearby professionals scrambling. The urgency spiraled, a sudden wave of fear washing over the crowd. I turned just in time to see a paramedic sprinting toward our gathering, breath coming in sharp bursts. "We need help." The driver, he called, the raw panic crashing over us like a rogue wave. "What happened?" Someone shouted. "He collapsed. We believe he's in shock, and his blood pressure is dropping fast." The unsettling revelation fell into the crowd. We had just begun to strengthen our resolve to support one life, only to have another's emergency manifest at our feet. Suddenly, the weight of guilt pressed back into the silence between heartbeats. He was now a part of this intricate web of fate that was binding us. A flickering light snuffed out by despair. "He needs assistance," the paramedic urged, seeking anyone with the knowledge to help, casting desperate eyes over the gathered assembly. My heart thundered again. It felt as though I was teetering on the edge of an abyss with lives hanging in the balance. Thoughts of my own inadequacies mixed with the anguish of being caught in a cycle of pain, but at that moment, I drew a deep breath, channeling courage that felt foreign within me. Perhaps it wasn't about saving anyone, perhaps it was simply about each of us standing in solidarity, reaching across the chasms to bring light to the other side. As we began to decide how to navigate this second storm, I felt the ground quaking beneath more than just my feet. I glanced at the woman and her daughter, at the older man, each reflecting the same dawning realization. And just then, the winds whipped fiercely around us, yet another gust carrying with it an omen of things not yet understood. The relentless rain was spinning a tale of lives intertwined, and a dark figure overshadowed our glimmer of hope, weaving itself into our story, hinting at the many echoes of our past lives that were being stirred anew. The storm rumbled in the distance once again, closer this time, and the final revelation loomed ahead, waiting to converge with us in a collision of choices made and lives forever altered. As the storm grew fiercer, palpable fear saturated the air, spiraling outwards from the chaos at the ambulances. We were bound to one another now, an inexplicable force pulling us into a tighter circle, our shared strife cementing an unspoken pact. Faces flickered with determination and apprehension, a dozen voices merging into a chorus of uncertainty as we grappled with the enormity of the moments unfolding before us. The paramedic, still searching our assembly for even the slightest glimmer of medical knowledge, seemed to sense the rush we felt, a thin thread of resolve tethering us all. I stepped forward, my heart hammering in my chest. "I can help," I said, my voice rising above the storm. "I have some training." The paramedic's expression shifted, a glint of relief sparking in his eyes amidst the sea of worry. "Great, we need every hand we can get. He's in bad shape, let's move." I slid down from the railing, the concrete gritty against my palms, as I hurried toward the collapsed figure. My heart raced with each step, the meaning of what I was about to do expanding the small window of courage inside me. The man lay on the cold asphalt, vulnerability stripped bare as he breathed slowly, each inhalation desperate, each exhalation tremorous. I knelt beside him, my hands hovering uncertainly before pressing against his clammy skin, as I called on all those lessons I'd stored away for just such a moment. I only caught fragments of my surrounding world, a woman's whispered prayers, children's muffled cries, the relentless thrum of rain blending with my heartbeat, until all that remained was the man and me. I focused solely on him, willing the noise to fade, transporting myself into that liminal space where desperation could be channeled into action. "Stay with me," I murmured, possessing an odd sense of authority. "Help is here. Just hold on." I could feel the collective breath of the crowd forming a shield around us, their hope binding us tighter than blood, but just as I began checking his vital signs, a sudden, dissonant cry rang out from the other side of the crowd. The woman beside me had become a mother once more. Time froze momentarily as she desperately called out, "Please. Somebody help my daughter." My heart jolted as I glanced toward her, the scene at her feet unraveling in slow motion. The little girl had slipped beneath the rain-soaked railing and was now teetering on the edge of the abyss, her wide eyes filled with confusion and terror as she struggled to understand her mother's shifting world. Her little feet danced on the ledge, the reality of her innocence contrasting brutally with the weight of impending danger. Suddenly, it felt as though the storm had transformed into a shapeshifter, threatening to steal all safety from our grasp. My instincts screamed. There were now lives burdened by urgency at every turn, flesh and blood connections that resonated with the hearts of all witnesses. "Stay with him," I shouted, throwing my voice toward the paramedic as I rushed toward the woman, who was becoming unraveling threads in her own right. "I'll go get her. Keep him safe. No, don't leave." The paramedic's shout faded behind me, but I didn't stop. I had to reach for the child first. Her world needed me more than my own. The crowd swayed, engulfed in entangled awe and horror, as I sprinted, dodging the raindrops that sliced through the air like tiny knives. "Sweetheart, come here," I called out, my voice a lifeline, reassuring and strong against the roar of the storm. The little girl stared back, apprehension knitting her brow. I could see her mother, frail as a sunflower caught in the wind, refusing to let despair consume her. With each step, I could taste the fear swirling like the storm clouds above us. "You have to be brave," I urged, my mind racing for solutions. "You can trust me." She looked puzzled, but she took a tentative step back, her hesitation stealing seconds that felt stretched into eternity. When I reached her, I knelt, matching her tear-filled gaze, taking her small hands into my own. "I'm here for you. Let's go find your mom together, okay?" And for the briefest moment, her shoulders relaxed, hope flickering, and I felt the weight of the world shift. But as I started to guide her back towards the railing, sheer panic took over, the rain intensified, the crowds pulsating wildly, and I became aware of an intense energy coiling at our feet, like a serpent prepared to strike. "Someone, help!" I cried out just as a blinding flash of light illuminated the darkness. The thunder boomed, shaking our core as we fought against the torrent, surrounded by a whirlwind of chaos. Though I held tightly to the child, the instantaneous surge of terror electrified my body. The realization hit me: all these fragile lives mingling together, their stories colliding in this storm, paradoxically tethered by anguish and unexpected kindness. Just as confusion sprawled into the corners of reality, rippling through our assembly, something caught my eye. Through the crowd's murmur, I felt a strange presence looming, a foreboding shadow beyond comprehension. That I turned my head, squinting against the downpour, and there it was, a figure standing apart from us, shrouded by the tempest, an odd serenity washing over them even as chaos reigned. My gut twisted, foreboding thrusting its icy presence into my mind, and an unsettling truth emerged: the storm was not just a backdrop but a catalyst for revelations we had yet to confront. "Hold on," I urged, yanking the little girl back, but the figure remained transfixed, a haunting reminder that beneath the surface, every storm carries secrets waiting to unfold. The moment hung heavy, straining against unseen Tenziona precipice, calling us into depths we could never anticipate. As the thunder cracked overhead, I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. The uncertainty of the moment clung like the rain-soaked clothes clinging to my skin. The figure's gaze, steady and unwavering, seemed to cut through the storm with a strange Clarissa beacon in the chaos. I quickly snapped back to my task, remembering the shaky hands of the child in mine, her wide eyes inscrutable against the backdrop of desperation. "Let's go," I urged, leading her away from the edge again. But as we moved, the figure remained, an unyielding guardian against the deluge, watching us instead of rushing towards the rescue, a puzzle piece that didn't fit in the frantic rhythm of our world. The mother's voice wavered again, vibrating with an undertone of dread. "Don't you dare leave me, sweet pea." Her call cut through the thrumming rain, igniting the mother's instinct that hung in the air like the ozone before a storm. I pulled the little girl closer, her heart racing against mine as we drew toward the mother's desperate reach. "Look. There's your mom." I coached her gently, the words spilling like lifelines. The rain lashed at us, each drop a sharp reminder of our urgency. Finally, her small foot found purchase on the drenched ground, and she darted toward her mother, but as they melted into one another's embrace, relief washed over the mother, quickly replaced by horror as she turned to me. "The old man!" she cried out, as though the storm had stolen the memory of his plight from the collective consciousness of the group. "Is he okay?" A knot tightened in my chest. "I'll check," I called back, my mind racing with the enormity of how much remained undone. I turned, the scene around me weaving intricate threads of fear and hope. People stirred, some clutching one another, others frantically looking for someone to help. The paramedic's brow was drawn, his face a mask of concentration as he tended to the victim. When our eyes met, I saw the flicker of concern and a plea for assistance. Without a second thought, I rushed back, the renewed urgency in my heart paving the path. "Just hold on. We'll get you help," I shouted to the man laying helplessly beneath the canopy of chaos. As I knelt beside him, I felt the pulse of the crowd echoing in my ears. Each heartbeat a reminder that he wasn't alone, that we were all linked through this storm that clawed at our sanity, that tested our resolve. "Can you hear me?" I continued, trying to keep my words soothing amidst the tempest. The man's face was ashen, and his breaths were shallow, a fading rhythm in this cruel cacophony. I placed my hands on his chest and searched for the strength to fight the odds. But just then, an unexpected sound pulled my attention, a soft voice rising above the murmuring storm. "This way. We can help." It was the figure, suddenly coming into focus, their silhouette illuminated by a stray flash of lightning that splintered the sky. They weren't isolated from the moment, they contained a quiet power that seemed unfazed by the turbulence. With purposeful strides, the figure approached the fallen man, possessing an aura of calm that spread like a bomb. "I'm a nurse. Let me help." The words were clear enough to slice through my waves of uncertainty. In moments, they moved seamlessly into action, their hands moving with grace and assurance. Finding what I had missed, that I stepped back, awash in both admiration and disbelief, as they worked with the paramedic, providing more advanced care. The intensity of it all, the blend of hope and fragile trust, felt like a live wire coursing through the air. "Why were you just standing back?" I blurted, the question bursting forth unbidden. "You could have come to help sooner." The figure paused, looking up from their efforts with an inscrutable expression that momentarily took my breath away. "I had to wait for the right moment," they replied quietly. I noticed their eyes, an unusual depth to them, as though they had witnessed the world crumble and rebuild 1,000 times. That it took a moment for their words to settle into my mind as I chewed over the implication. Waiting until the right moment, a philosophy that echoed beyond our immediate chaos, and suddenly I felt small, a mere player in a much larger game. I thought about the other lives swirling around us, so many moments that held the potential for connection and change, depending on how each one approached the storm. But before I could dissect that further, a sudden gasp tore through the crowd, a noise that swept through us like wildfire. A woman's scream rent the air, raw and instinctual, as she rushed forward. "My son! Somebody find my son!" Reality crashed down around me like waves against jagged rocks. The gathering storm, now an upheaval of urgency, the heartache thick enough to drown us all amidst the rising tension. My senses sharpened, adrenaline no longer merely fueling me but transforming into something deeper, a reckoning staring me straight in the face. "Help me." A voice emerged from the chaos, frantic, inconsolable. "Another child, lost in the shadows of despair." This wasn't just about this storm anymore, it was about every twisted fate colliding at once. There I stood, fear intertwining with an awakening resolve, realizing this storm would force us to contend with the depths of human connection and the unrelenting power of hope. But as I stepped forward once more into the chaos, I locked eyes with the figure again, a fleeting thought passing through me: truths lay hidden, waiting to emerge when the storm finally passed. And what if the answers we sought led us into darkness we could never navigate? The world around me spun on its axis, a swirling vortex of life, loss, and the undeniable interweaving of destinies, forever altered. United in our struggle, we faced the storm head-on, the horizon shrouded in a kind of uncertainty that was both terrifying and strangely invigorating. And I knew, amid it all, that no one would emerge unchanged. The storm roared like a beast unleashed, ripping through the remnants of civility that had clung desperately to this gathering of strangers. It was more than weather, it felt like a metaphor for what lay dormant in all of us, a tumultuous reminder that life was often a matter of surviving the worst while hoping for something better. As cries continued to echo, mixing with the relentless hammering of the rain, I found myself torn. There was the woman frantically searching for her son, and on the periphery, the old man still fighting through his silent agony. The juxtaposition of their struggles felt like ripping a page out of a book, forcing me to consider, who deserved help more? The mother pleading for her child, or the old man whose life was slipping away in front of us? "I need more hands," the paramedic shouted, urgency slicing through me like a lightning bolt. I stepped into action, galvanizing myself to seek help, or at least to encourage those around me to dig deeper into their wells of compassion. But the figure, the nurse, had already begun organizing a small band of individuals, directing them with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra through a chaotic symphony. "Stay focused. We need to find the boy," they commanded, their voice resonating through the storm. Something inside me stirred, an awakening understanding that leadership, even in the most desperate of situations, was about guiding others with hope. That's what every rescuer at heart seeks, to offer the chance for survival wrapped in glimmers of faith. With each passing moment, the cries grew more fervent, a raw primal call that ignited a collective instinct deep within me. I reached out to a few nearby faces, fellow onlookers who had been sedated into shock. "Come on. We can't let fear paralyze us." My words barely cut through the clattering rain, their silent stares held disbelief, but behind those looks were buried flickers of resolve waiting to be ignited. Suddenly, a break in the clouds illuminated a small area, dappled light revealing a nearby park, where playground equipment stood abandoned under the rainfall. It hadn't occurred to me before. The echoes of the mother's cries rang louder, and instinct kicked in once more. "He might be in there," I yelled, motioning to the shadows, suddenly feeling the weight of the collective breath stalling around us as if everything hung in the balance. A few hearts picked up in momentum, and as I ran toward the playground, I found myself spurred by two others who followed my lead. The unnerving feeling that if we did nothing, if we failed to look, we would share in the shame of inaction spurred me forward. But just then, I felt a sharp tug on my arm. The nurse stood beside me, their face a thundercloud of urgency mixed with calm. "We can't split up," they asserted. "Every second counts. I can't just stand by. There's a child lost out here, we need to help." The anguish in my words drew a moment of focus between USA's shared understanding that went beyond words. "You think I don't know that?" They came back, their voice raw yet steady. "But if we separate, who will help the old man? His inhaler is missing, and he may not survive without it." The urgency hit a resonant chord in me. How had I become so lost in the frantic search for the boy that I momentarily forgot the precarious life hanging on by the breath of a single inhaler? We were in a moment that demanded sacrifice, each choice leading us down a narrow path where some souls would inevitably be lost or saved. That I took a breath, dropping my fingers gently from the small child's embrace as I stepped away from the playground's shadows. "You're right. Let's take care of him first, then head back," I said, my heart skidded back into its cage, understanding the weight of heroic efforts often rests on balancing priorities. So we returned to the old man presently folded into the earth, alive but fading. I reached for his hand, hoping to give him a connection, some tether through the madness. The nurse knelt beside me, the two of us creating a small sphere of calm amidst the storm. "Can you hear me?" My name is, but before I could finish, something caught the edge of my perception. A shadow detached itself from the darkened edge of the park. "Mom." The voice quivered, trembling beneath the tremor of the rain. A figure emerged, soaked and dazed but unmistakably a child. My heart twisted with both elation and dread as I turned, ready to shout out for the maternal guardian, when suddenly the ground shuddered beneath us. A crack split the earth, and the old man's eyes widened in terror, the sudden realization as the thunder rolled in full force. "Help!" The nurse shouted, scrambling to move the old man, when another two figures rushed at us, the murmur of voices rising above the storm. It was panic-laden, a perfect mirroring of my own spiraling emotions. The child's name danced on the tip of my tongue, a desperate effort to bridge the growing divide between chaos and hope, when suddenly everything tilted once more. Another child, a girl, burst through the rain, face streaked with water, her expression a mix of fear and defiance. "Mom! I found him!" I found, but before she could finish her thought, the world erupted in a blinding flash of light, an explosion resonating through the air, throwing us off our feet. As we sprawled across the wet earth, gasps tearing through the group, an unseen barrier had fragmented our fragile hope. And the whispers of destiny intertwined further with despair, leaving us grappling in the dark for hope amid the unrelenting storm that promised to sweep away all that we held dear. The air crackled with electricity, stinging my senses like icy salt. I pushed myself up from the ground, blinking through the torrential downpour, heart racing with terror and confusion. The memory of the explosion lingered in the back of my mind, both keeping me grounded and threatening to bring me under. All around, people staggered to their feet, their eyes wide with disbelief, mirrors of my own tumultuous emotions. "Is everyone all right?" I shouted, my voice lost in a cacophony of rain and cries. I turned back toward the haunting echoes of terror. A familiar figure leaned against a swing set, breathing heavily. The old man's face twisted in agony as he caught his breath, fingers clutching desperately at his chest. "Where's the inhaler?" The nurse barked, urgency drenching their voice like the rain. They knelt beside him, eyes scanning the muddy ground, while I instinctively patted down my pockets, hoping perhaps in vain to find anything that could bridge the widening gap between life and death. I dropped it," the old man wheezed, his voice rasping like dry leaves in a windstorm. "Back before the storm." The nurse turned to me, face a mask of determination that echoed the intensity of the moment. "Stay with him. He'll get the inhaler." Without waiting for my reply, they dashed toward the playground's entrance, where the shadows swirled and whispered with all the things we feared. Time slowed as I held the old man's shaking hand, squeezing it tighter as if to pass strength from my own soul to his fading spirit. "Focus on me," I urged. "We need you to hold on, keep fighting." Our eyes locked, a collision of despair and resolve that told me more than words ever could. But hope flickered in the rain-soaked chaos. Nearby, the girl who had burst through the storm clutched her brother tightly, face pressed into his shoulder as she whispered reassuringly to him. In that moment, the reality of her bravery caught like a flame among the damp, dead weight of lost chances. Her defiance reminded me, our world may have crumbled, but human connection had not. A sudden rush of adrenaline propelled me to my feet, scanning the murky expanse of the park, where shadows danced against the storm's wrath. I could still feel his hand in my grip, a tether still binding each second. Every heartbeat was a plea for survival, echoing through the chaos. "Look for it!" I cried, desperation pushing me as I waved toward a group of onlookers huddled beside the battered structures. "Help us find the inhaler. We can't waste time." Cold rain continued to lash us, but a few faces lit with reluctant energy, resolving to act. A couple of people started searching around the swings, scouring the ground for any sign of the inhaler that could mean life. I turned back to the old man, sweat mixing with the rain on his brow as he gasped for air. "Just breathe, stay with me," I murmured, my heart racing as I watched his eyes flutter, somewhere between consciousness and surrender. Suddenly, through the turmoil, a small voice emerged once more, breaking the oppressive dread. I found it. The child's voice, rising above the thunder, filled my heart with a rush of hope. Turning, I saw the girl, her small hands triumphantly holding up the inhaler amid all the chaos, rain glistening off her face like tiny stars that dared to shine through the darkest night. Here. I brought it. She shouted, the determination in her voice igniting something deep inside me. Give it to the nurse. I screamed, as they dashed back, eyes wide, realization setting in. The nurse grasped the inhaler from the little girl, tears mingling with the rain as they rushed to help the old man. The old man struggled to focus as the inhaler was pressed gently to his lips. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, suspended between the peril of the moment and the frustration of the storm. Just a little longer, I whispered to him, fingers still entwined with his, a pact holding us steady against the tempest that he inhaled deeply, eyes flaring open with a hint of recognition and gratitude. A heaviness lifted from his chest, his breaths began to come with relief. Around me, a vibration stirred, strangers observing the power of the hope that flickers even in the deepest of despair. We may have lost our sense of safety, but together, we fought like a band of warriors armed with compassion, and yet, just as their breaths evened out into a hopeful rhythm, a rumble thrummed through the ground, sending tremors of fear spiraling once more. What now? I thought, eyes darting to the distant skyline where a new storm brewed, darker and more menacing than the one we bore. Then, in the heavy air, the nurse whispered something to the old man, a revelation laced with urgency. We need to get you to a hospital. This storm won't last forever, but we need to move now. Their words pierced through the veil of my understanding, shaping an unnerving truth as dread settled in my stomach. We stood amidst chaos, but survival required more than just hope. It demanded action and sacrifice, the kind we could only muster when our sanctuary lay shrouded under shadows. Before I could utter a word, a figure appeared at the edge of the park, the boy, drenched but alive, a lifeline of hope threading back to his mother. He wove his way through the rain, fragile but determined. An unexpected shimmer glinted on the horizon, a glistening glow among the storm. I hardly dared to hope, yet as the skies wept heavier, it transformed into a cascade of vibrant colors, a rainbow birthed from the darkness. Amid the tension and fear, I grasped its grace, a reminder that even after the worst storms, blessings still lingered. I stepped toward the boy, moving to intercept him and guide him safely back to his mother, heart racing with renewed purpose. But just as I reached out, a blaring horn pierced the air, drowning my thoughts in alarm. A vehicle careened down the drenched road, tires screeching against the haphazard landscape. Get down! I screamed, but as I turned back to the gathered crowd, the world around me was consumed once more by chaos. The screeching tires, frantic shouts, and the echo of lives' precariousness crashing against the fragile thread that bound us together. The storm continued to rage, and in the heart of it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper awaited us in the land of storms, desperate to unveil its final twist amidst the unyielding rain. The storm had bared its teeth, a ferocious roar echoing through the chaos as I struggled to ground myself. With the echoes of the near collision still ringing in my ears, I propelled myself toward the boy, catching a flicker of misunderstanding in his wide eyes. Fear gripped me, but I couldn't let that distract me from the reality that unified us all in that moment, a fragile tapestry of lives teetering on the brink. Stay close to me. I shouted over the din, urgency spilling into my voice as I reached for him, a lifeline thrown into the tempest. He stumbled closer, instinctively trusting as I steered him back to his mother's embrace. The rain soaked through us, but that connection pulsed like a beacon, guiding us to safety amidst the raging storm. The world blurred around us, but the sanctity of that moment held true, the union of heartbeats, strangers becoming a family when faced with peril. Just as we neared the edge of the chaos, a mother's piercing scream sliced through the air. "Bobby!" she cried, every syllable steeped in raw agony, and I blinked through the torrent of rain to see the woman we had nearly severed from our resolve. She was funneling through the crowd, panic etching lines deep into her face, hands reaching out for her son who had yet to emerge from the shadows. The weight of her desperation fell heavy around us like the rain, creating a profound silence among those standing by. Help her. I urged, motioning to the framed unity the crowd had become, a growing legion weaving through the wreckage, coaxing hope to life. As we converged, strangers became a choir of collective strength. We split like water across the rocks, arms outstretched and will entwined, calling for Bobby to return. Together. A voice echoed through the storm, bolstering me with its power. We pushed forward, relentless in our search for a child who had become the embodiment of everything we held dear in despair, Bobby. The frantic mother's wails pulsed in the air, igniting ferocity within me. I joined the search party as we swept through the park, faces lit by flickering flames of purpose despite the obscure chaos weaving through our hearts. He could be anywhere. I thought, shoving against the torrent, expanding both my resolve and my fears, and then, we heard it, a tiny, fragile whimper, the sound of innocence trembling against the shadows of doubt. This way! Someone cried, and like a shadow, the collective heartbeat surged toward the sound, a chorus of hearts racing against fate. We pushed through the barrier of both storm and panic until suddenly, we saw him, a small figure, huddled beneath a slide, rain cascading down like a cruel torrent above him, Bobby. His mother's voice cracked, breaking through the rain as she bolted toward her child, arms outstretched, every fiber of her being tasting the sweet elixir of hope. I closed the distance too, meeting her gaze amid the storm, the mirrored fear drenched in love, a tempest made flesh. As she gathered her son into her embrace, a hush fell over us, punctuated only by the relentless rain. For just an instant, the storm held its breath, and the overwhelming relief surged like wildfire through the assembled crowd. Hope blossomed amidst the chaos, strangers became family through shared sacrifice, and in that moment, I realized we were bound by something more profound than just circumstance. We were tied by the threads of fate, interconnected like a delicate web. Bobby looked up, eyes wide and innocent, and in that gaze, I found pieces of myself, reflections of resilience born from within that swirling chaos. As I caught sight of the nurse in faded scrubs moving toward the old man on the ground, I felt another relentless pulse of urgency, a collision of caring leading us once more into the storm that I pushed back against the thrumming rain, making my way toward them as if fueled by the warmth that had ignited in the shared experience of unity. The nurse met my gaze, determination grounded in their very essence. "He's stable, for now, but I need your help to get him to safety," they instructed, unyielding energy saturating their words. Time had become an illusion, turning the ordinary moment into a race against fate itself. "Well, do it together," I affirmed, stepping alongside them. Each word held weight, interlaced with power as we shifted toward the old man, gathering our strength as one. "We won't lose anyone tonight." When we arrived at the old man, his condition mirrored the tempest, battered yet alive, and I knew that this was a moment that demanded not just healing, but connection, an acknowledgement of his sacrifices and fears. We hoisted him up together, every movement a reflection of our shared commitment to fight the darkness, the whisper of hope ever present within those uncertain breaths. As we moved toward salvation, I could feel the collective energy of the gathered strangers shifting, melding, creating a tapestry woven by warmth and shared compassion. The old man winced, and I whispered raggedly, "We've got you. Don't let go." My heart danced through the storm, eliciting promises that transcended decades, reaching through the years to reincarnate a spirit we thought lost. That we pulled him toward the ambulance, rain now a rhythmic melody accompanying our every heartbeat, tangling our fates together. With each step, the shadows of the past faded further, nudged aside by the dawning realization that we weren't just faces in a tempest, we were souls intertwined, reclaiming the light amidst every darkness that thrummed around us. As we loaded him into the ambulance, the swarm of strangers transformed into a community. I glanced back towards the park, eyes catching the woman and her child still huddled together, hearts woven in the nerve of survivor's grace. There was an understanding building, an acceptance too that transcended individual sacrifice, the hope that the threads we spun might yet reach others caught in the currents of despair. And then, amidst the storm's relentless embrace, an unexpected gust surged through, an opening in the clouds punctuated by the vibrant glow of a newfound dawn. Emerging in shards from the darkness, rays of sunlight broke through the storm as if woven by the hands of 1,000 hearts. There lay the promise of healing and the beauty of collective journeys piecing together what had momentarily been lost. That I stood still, heart racing, watching as each soul flickered with light, a symbiotic unity sparking from death's claws. The face of the driver crossed my mind, still tethering the complexity of our bittersweet entanglement, a reminder that as in life, in every story there are paths shrouded in shadows that beg the question, which light will guide us through? In the distance, thunder rumbled softly as the storm drew back, revealing a world painted anew with an ever-evolving vibrance. I turned to the blurred shapes surrounding my gripping hands, glistening with dew and resilience, and felt the powerful, heartwarming surge rise within me. We stood as one, a community that had stood together against the storm, interwoven by struggles fought and won, lives saved in the face of tragedy. A laugh danced above the tumult, a child's giggle trapped in the heart of rain-soaked love, the promise of tomorrow held aloft like a fragile bird ready to reclaim the skies. And in that moment, beneath the canopy of potential, I surrendered my fears, my aching doubts. I found my voice and let it ring free, a fervent hymn rising anew, and we breathed together, a symphony of souls stitched tightly amidst the fabric of fate. We were dawn breaking through the darkest of storms, a reminder that we can emerge into hope even as the world tempts us toward despair. We were here, finally, together, alive. After Allah, life was a story stitched with many threads, and together we were more than just strangers. We were a masterpiece sculpted by the storms we had weathered, glowing with every whispered promise that lingered long after the clouds had dissolved. Perhaps, in finding each other, we had found ourselves, too. And as the last vestiges of rain fell, I smiled, letting the sun shape the horizon ahead, realizing we were never alone, not now, not ever. Sometimes all it took was a storm to reveal what lay buried in our hearts, the insistence, the undeniable strength, and the irreplaceable power of connection.